Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Chicago Med Season 10 pays off an underrated dupe from the 2025 One Chicago crossover, but with a twist. Less than 2 months after the One Chicago crossover, in the trenches, Chicago Med spoils fans with the reunion of an unexpected duo who first met during the 3-part event, but puts a twist on their newfound relationship. As many will recall, In the Trenches brought the casts of all 3 One Chicago shows together for the first time since Infection in 2019. The COVID-19 pandemic and ensuing safety protocols limited the amount of crossover between all 3 TV series, which is why it took so long for NBC to produce another 3-hour special event in the franchise. During the 2025 One Chicago special crossover, Chicago Fire's Stella Kidd and Chicago PD's Adam Ruzick got trapped underground in a subway tunnel when gas explosions rocked Chicago's City Employee Benefits Department building. The teams from all 3 shows came together to rescue and treat victims, find the people responsible, and save their own. In the midst of the chaos, new duos emerged, aside from Kidd and Ruzick, including a pair who reunited in Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15, Down in a Hole. When Chicago Med's Luke Mitchell as Dr. Mitch Ripley gets himself into a precarious situation in Season 10, Episode 15, Randall Mouch McHolland, played by Chicago Fire's Christian Stolt, arrives to save the day. A couple of episodes prior, Sharon Goodwin suspended Ripley after his reckless behavior. Since then, he has been trying to string himself back together and get back to the person and doctor he was before his friend, Sully, died. Flash forward to Down in a Hole. Ripley stumbles across a woman and her daughter trapped in a well. Ripley calls in reinforcements and Mouch is a part of the rescue squad from Firehouse 128 who arrives at the scene in Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15. Mouch reveals he has been taking extra lieutenant shifts at other fire stations to gain more experience, explaining why he's riding with the 128. As a result, Ripley and Mouch team up to save the mother and daughter from the well. Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15 isn't the first time Ripley and Mouch have crossed paths. After Trudy got shot during the 2025 One Chicago crossover, she was taken to Gaffney Chicago Medical Center, with Mouch, her husband, by her side. Ripley and Dr. Caitlin Lennox took care of Trudy, which is how the One Chicago franchise established Ripley and Mouch's relationship. Unfortunately, the Chicago PD character's condition was quite severe, resulting in some tension between the 2 men. Ripley and Lennox resorted to extreme measures to save Trudy, and Mouch wasn't sure if he could trust the doctors with his wife's life. Mouch and Ripley had a couple of confrontations, none of which got out of hand, but it's safe to say that their relationship didn't exactly get off to a great start. Trudy ultimately survived, and Mouch was grateful to Ripley and Lennox for saving her. So although viewers didn't get to see a lot of Mouch and Ripley, at least compared to other character pairings in the 2025 One Chicago crossover, the event laid the groundwork for a potential friendship. Instead of Ripley helping Mouch, like he did during the One Chicago crossover event, the firefighter saves the doctor in Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15. Ripley is chosen to go down the well to rescue the woman, whose leg needs to be amputated, and her daughter. However, when they get out, the walls of the structure collapse, trapping Ripley. Firehouse 128 rushes to save Ripley, but he eventually loses consciousness due to lack of oxygen. While Mouch and the other firefighters are working hard on the ground to rescue the Chicago Med Season 10 character, Ripley hallucinates his dead friend Sully. He gives Ripley advice on how to navigate his recent struggles and move on from his death. Thankfully, Ripley can follow Sully's guidance since he survives getting trapped in the well. Mouch saves Ripley at the end of Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15, seemingly repaying the doctor for saving his wife's life. Going forward, Mouch and Ripley have undoubtedly formed a long-lasting bond. When 2 people go through 2 stressful, life-threatening situations together within a couple of months, they are bound to become friends at the very least. Ahead of the premiere of Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15, Luke Mitchell spoke with TV Line about his character's relationship with Mouch and confirmed that their second interaction strengthens their connection. He explained, NBC has demonstrated that the One Chicago universe can handle a big crossover event following the COVID-19 pandemic, so it stands to reason that the three shows can incorporate more small crossovers, like the one in Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15, Down in a Hole. One of the best parts of the franchise has always been the ability for all three casts to interact with one another. Over the years, Firehouse 51, the Intelligence Unit, and Gaffney Chicago Medical Center have come together numerous times to work together, and their team-ups are always exciting. However, in recent seasons, crossovers between Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, and Chicago Med, whether big or small, have essentially been non-existent. After Ripley and Mouch's reunion, though, fans now know that smaller crossovers are possible. Hopefully, as the One Chicago universe continues, the writers and producers will take advantage of the characters at their disposal and start creating more compelling friendships, like Ripley and Mouch's in Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 15. The night was tense as the sirens wailed in the distance, piercing through the steady hum of Chicago Med. Inside the ER was swarming with doctors, nurses, and patients, each one carrying the weight of their own story, their own fear. But amid the chaos, there was a glimmer of something different, a sense of anticipation in the air, like a storm about to break. Dr. Vanessa Taylor, still relatively new to the chaos of Chicago Med, took a deep breath as she adjusted the stethoscope around her neck. Her mind raced with the overwhelming responsibility of her shift, but there was something more pressing nagging at the back of her mind. She glanced over at Dr. Sam Abrams, who stood beside her, absorbed in a patient's chart. The moment had arrived, the moment they'd been waiting for ever since their unlikely pairing during the 2025 One Chicago crossover event. At the time, nobody had expected much from the quiet, introspective Sam Abrams and the bold, driven Vanessa Taylor, but what started as a professional necessity, helping each other through the tension-filled demands of the crossover, had blossomed into something far more compelling. Their subtle bond had been almost invisible to the rest of the world, but it had been growing ever since, and tonight it was finally going to come to a head. Vanessa approached Sam, who was now reviewing lab results with his typical attention to detail. His brow furrowed in concentration, but his sharp eyes softened when they met hers. "You ready?" Vanessa asked, her voice low but steady. "Ready for what?" Sam replied, his expression unreadable, though there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something she hadn't noticed before. "To finish what we started," Vanessa said. "The crossover, the patience, the impact." Sam looked at her, and for the briefest of moments, there was a vulnerability in his gaze that he usually kept well hidden behind his calm demeanor. "Are you suggesting we go back to that place? After everything that's happened?" he asked quietly, though his voice held a trace of intrigue. "Exactly. It's time. We've learned enough since then. We're more than ready." The conversation hung in the air as the pace of the ER swelled, but something felt different now. Both doctors had been changed by their experience during the 2025 crossover event, something that neither one had expected when they were first paired together. They'd crossed paths in the chaos of saving lives in the wake of a massive, multi-episode emergency, their different styles clashing but somehow complementing each other. Sam, the quiet, methodical surgeon, and Vanessa, the fierce, independent critical care specialist, had each seen something in the other they hadn't realized they needed. They didn't just save patients together, they saved each other in subtle, often unseen ways. As the evening wore on, the ER continued to pulse with energy, but there was an undeniable shift in the air. The room became a stage for their unspoken connection to reach its tipping point. Then, the phone rang. "Dr. Taylor, Dr. Abrams," a voice crackled over the intercom. "We need you in Trauma 3, critical patient, possible gunshot wound, bring the crash cart." Without hesitation, both doctors sprang into action, their movements synchronized, practiced. It was like second nature now, no words were necessary. They had been through so much together that, in that moment, the world outside their bubble ceased to exist. As they entered the trauma room, a fresh wave of adrenaline hit them. A man, barely conscious, was lying on the table, blood seeping through his shirt. His breathing was shallow, his pulse weak. The ER team had already begun work on him, but it was clear that the situation was dire.